A cold wind sweeps across the Ziluk border, crossing as long lines of cargo trucks sit abandoned, their engines silent, their drivers confused, and Europe's northern frontier unusually tense. It is here, at this quiet stretch between Latvia and Russia, that the first signs of a major shift appeared, barriers coming down, gates locking into place, and officers informing drivers that a major decision had just been enacted. Europe has closed key border routes and bridges connected to Russia, and what started as local murmurs has erupted into international shock. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Conflict Front Stories channel. Please subscribe and like my videos, because today's unfolding situation is much larger than a simple border halt. This moment carries deep political weight, military implications, and signals that the relationship between Moscow and Europe is entering a new phase, colder and more unpredictable than at any time in the last decade. The story begins early in the morning when truckers traveling between the Baltic states and Russia reported receiving sudden notifications from their logistics companies. Border checkpoints that were usually busy had been shut with no warning. Drivers stepped out of their vehicles, looked around, and realized the road ahead was sealed. Some initially assumed it was temporary maintenance, but within minutes, word spread that multiple European governments had jointly decided to close these routes. From above, satellite imagery could be seen circulating online, showing border bridges completely deserted. Crossings that once carried thousands of tons of goods each day now looked like empty concrete strips stretching over frozen rivers. Exterior scenes across the region revealed a pattern forming. At Poland's frontier, officers redirected travelers back toward the interior. In Finland, heavy barriers were rolled across the highway, their steel frames clanking as security forces locked them into place. Along Lithuania's border, flashing lights and roadblocks appeared simultaneously, signaling that this was coordinated rather than spontaneous. European officials called it a protective action, but in Moscow, the announcement was met with alarm. Analysts in major newsrooms quickly began debating what this would mean for Russian supply lines, trade flows, and diplomatic relations already strained under heavy pressure. Inside government control rooms across Europe, interior environments were filled with calm but firm exchanges between ministers and security agencies. Large screens displayed maps marked with red indications showing every crossing now restricted. Officials monitored the situation while maintaining short, precise conversations about logistics and public communication. One minister was heard stating that the decision was not aimed at escalation, but at reinforcing safety, countering pressure, and controlling movements that had raised security concerns in recent weeks. The interior tone was controlled, but the urgency was clearly felt. Back on the exterior scene, footage from border highways captured long convoys of trucks waiting for instructions. Drivers stood in small groups talking, filming videos for social media, or calling their families to explain the delay. Some expressed frustration. Others said they had sensed something like this might happen due to rising tensions. The closure of bridges made the situation even more dramatic. Key structures that once linked trade, travel, and cooperation between the East and West were now silent, with barriers placed at each end. In the distance, snow quietly fell over one of the bridges, creating a stark image of how suddenly the geopolitical landscape had shifted. As journalists and investigators began piecing the story together, more details emerged about why Europe acted. Recent developments had prompted concerns about movements across borders that were difficult to monitor, including activity involving sanctioned goods. Authorities also mentioned the need to strengthen control in response to rapidly changing regional conditions. Although none of the governments described the decision as permanent, many experts believe this marks a turning point that will not be easily reversed. Europe appears focused on securing its frontiers, reducing vulnerabilities, and signaling that political pressure will continue. Inside analytical centers, interior scenes showed teams reviewing data from border checkpoints, trade flows, and security reports. Screens displayed numbers highlighting how much freight moved across each route daily, and the sudden drop to zero caused immediate recalculations. Economists discussed potential disruptions to supply chains, while security analysts examined how Russia might respond. The dialogue remained concise, with short interior exchanges capturing the urgency without revealing classified information. Europe's message seemed clear: border traffic is no longer business as usual. Meanwhile, in Moscow's exterior political environment, spokespeople reacted sharply. They described the closures as unfriendly steps and expressed concern for how citizens and businesses would be affected. Reporters crowded outside government buildings, filming live updates as officials tried to convey calm but firm responses. Commentators on state channels began describing the development as another instance of Europe aligning with broader strategies aimed at isolating Moscow. Although the language was measured, the sense of strategic frustration was evident. Looking at the broader picture, this move carries consequences beyond trade interruptions. Europe and Russia have long relied on certain border routes and bridges, not only for commerce, but for diplomatic and civilian interactions. Closing them, even temporarily, sends a symbolic message that the trust which once allowed these crossings to function smoothly is deteriorating quickly. Analysts pointed out that when nations close physical links, it often reflects deeper political divides. These decisions rarely happen in isolation, rather, they are part of larger strategic calculations. Exterior footage from European capitals showed citizens reacting to the news. Some were surprised to learn that crossings had been shut so abruptly, while others saw it as predictable given the tension in the region. People stood outside cafes, checking updates on their phones, while commentators on television explained the implications in real time. Images of sealed border gates played on screens across homes and public spaces, reinforcing the seriousness of the situation. Interior conversations inside newsrooms were short but intense as editors instructed correspondents to verify reports, check official statements, and avoid speculation. The goal was to present the facts clearly while reflecting the fast-changing events. Journalists debated whether this move was a defensive measure, a political signal, or a response to specific intelligence. Whatever the reason, they understood the magnitude of the decision and the global attention it would draw. From the exterior perspective of logistics companies, operations were thrown into disarray. Managers contacted clients and partners, explaining that shipments would be delayed indefinitely. Some companies started rerouting goods through alternative paths, but these detours were longer and more expensive. Warehouses prepared for overflow as trucks, unable to cross, began returning with full loads. The commercial consequences were immediate. Russia's domestic reaction also unfolded in stages. Exterior scenes in major cities showed traffic around key distribution centers slowing as companies recalculated their supply routes. Market analysts warned that certain imported products might become harder to obtain if closures remained long. Although officials reassured the public that contingency plans were in place, uncertainty lingered. Many citizens wondered how long the situation would last and whether additional restrictions might follow. Inside diplomatic offices in Brussels, interior discussions revolved around whether Europe should take further steps or simply monitor the outcome of this major closure. Officials debated the potential for negotiations, the risks of miscommunication, and the possibility that Moscow might respond with countermeasures. The atmosphere was serious but deliberate. The tone of the conversations showed that Europe wanted to project unity and resolve while avoiding unnecessary escalation. Back on the exterior ground near one of the sealed bridges in Finland, Border guards stood watch as news crews filmed the quiet scene. The bridge, usually humming with traffic, now stretched empty across the landscape. The silence made the moment feel even more significant. The closure of such a key link was more than a policy shift. It was a visual representation of strained relations. The bridge had once symbolized cooperation between neighbors. Now it symbolized separation. As the hours turned into days, analysts worldwide reviewed the broader geopolitical impact. Closing border routes may push Moscow to rely more heavily on alternative partners or more complicated trade corridors. For Europe, the closures reinforce the message that it is prioritizing control and security during a sensitive period. This is not just about physical routes. It is about strategy, leverage, and long-term positioning. Interior discussions among think tanks were short and focused on the consequences for diplomacy. Some argued that Europe's move was intended to remind Moscow that negotiations and cooperation cannot proceed normally under current tensions. Others suggested it was a preemptive defensive step to prevent risks that might arise from high traffic across borders. Regardless of the interpretation, the unified action of multiple countries highlighted a shared strategic perception. In the exterior world of global markets, the reaction was immediate. Prices for certain commodities fluctuated as traders anticipated supply delays. Shipping companies reevaluated contract timelines. Analysts commented that the uncertainty generated by border closures would likely affect trade forecasts for the next quarter. Although none of this created panic, it added another layer of complexity to already sensitive economic conditions. Meanwhile, people living in border towns experienced the shift firsthand. Exterior shots showed locals walking through quiet streets, noticing the unusual absence of foreign vehicles. Small businesses that relied on cross-border customers felt the impact immediately. Restaurants that once welcomed traveling drivers now had empty tables. Residents interviewed by local media said the region felt different, as if something fundamental had changed in their daily rhythm. Interior scenes from municipal offices revealed short discussions among local officials as they prepared support measures for businesses affected by the sudden halt. These conversations emphasized practicality, explaining benefits, adjusting regulations, and coordinating with national authorities. While these discussions lacked the political intensity seen in national capitals, they captured the real human effect of the situation. Across Europe's exterior political landscape, speeches from various leaders reinforced a common theme. The decision was made to protect regional security and to respond to changing conditions that required strict control. They emphasized that Europe's borders must remain secure, and decisions like these, although difficult, were necessary. The speeches were measured, avoiding aggressive language while firmly asserting sovereignty. Russia's response, meanwhile, continued to develop. Exterior statements from officials indicated they viewed Europe's action as unjustified, and discussions began about possible diplomatic notes or negotiations. Analysts speculated about whether Moscow might attempt to reopen routes through diplomatic channels or redirect trade flows elsewhere. The broader question remained, how long will this closure last, and what will it mean for future relations? Inside strategic planning rooms across Europe, interior scenarios were developed to prepare for different outcomes. Teams considered whether the closures would lead to new diplomatic engagements, trade adjustments, or additional security measures. The planning was pragmatic, with each scenario mapped out in simple terms. The interior environment highlighted the seriousness with which Europe viewed the situation and the importance of preparation. As days passed, aerial footage of the closed bridges and crossings became symbolic images shared across the world. The contrast between busy cities and silent border zones became part of the narrative. The exterior scenes captured the essence of the tension, stillness at the borders contrasted with active political dialogue in capitals. In this evolving situation, Europe and Russia now face a moment where choices will influence the next chapter of their relationship. The closure of border routes and bridges is not simply a logistical barrier, it is a political statement that reflects deeper strategic shifts. The world will be watching closely to see how both sides navigate this new phase. Will negotiations ease the tension, or will the closures deepen the divide? At this moment, the landscape remains uncertain and the stakes continue to rise. And as always, thank you for watching Conflict Front Stories. If you found this explanation helpful, please subscribe and like my videos. More updates and deep dive analyses are coming soon as this story continues to develop.